In our forum agenda, in the very end, you would see a side event dedicated specifically to discussing the current state of civil society engagement into association agreement implementation, sharing any good practices, and maybe speaking about passion, because we haven't put it on the agenda, but it's definitely worth discussing. So how to keep this passion and how to make it effectively, I hope the civil society experts from the 3 countries and the European Union would have a lot to say on that. But before that, we have quite a challenging agenda covering such topics as, first of all, and that would be our next session, the state of affairs, starting from accomplishments to challenges, and then going to discussion what possible future, what next question, which is all of us raise, what forms of models could be followed, where should we look for inspiration. Also discussing the value added of the Eastern Partnership key deliverables as compared to the association agreement commitments. Also, we will touch upon the political situation in the 3 countries because of the forthcoming elections, also in the European Union, are definitely having some implications for the integration and association agreement implementation. Then we would go to discussing the role of the parliamentary bodies and how legislative practices could be more effective to speed up the implementation of the association agreement. And we will also touch the topic which interests most of all many people. It's economic sphere, the DCFTA, the internal markets integration. And also one more panel would be devoted to integration in the sphere of justice and home affairs, which also some say is one of the perspective areas to look for. But at the moment, I'm going to stop this introductory session by thanking all the contributors. Not all of you should leave these places, but yes, you and Alexander, and I kindly ask to join other speakers and moderator to it's actually Dirk Lawrence. Please come to take a place, and Claudius Maniokas, our co-organizer, whom I'm giving this micro. Thank you all.
Thank you, Zoriana. So we are missing Dirk Lawrence. Oh, yeah, please come. So I'm taking over. Thank you. I'm very happy. To join. This nice, now traditional endeavor. Indeed, association forum, incredibly good thing, and I hope an area to exchange views on this very unique, unprecedented task, really, in terms of association, because we know what this is really a unique agreement in its comprehensiveness, in its really ambition. And also in terms of challenges these countries, all 3 countries, face in terms of state strengthening, resilience strengthening, and other things. So this session is about state of association. So therefore, let me probably to start and propose to start from short opening, maybe statements of you each. May ask something about 5 minutes. Then I will make a break and take questions from the audience, and then we will move to other topics. So which is about then second trilateral probably cooperation and forms of this cooperation. And even third one, if we have enough time, what could be next, really, and what are the other forms of cooperation which can strengthen association process. So therefore, let's start from this very essential question. So what is the state of association? What is happening? And I know it's happening a lot, really. There are laws, there are important reforms, but instead of probably enlisting all this, I would ask you to focus probably on one or two key things, what you consider key things in implementing association, and maybe on the things which can be improved with regard to association. So both in terms of internal somehow structures, processes, conditions, as well as external ones. So let me start from the order really of the program. So Olga, the floor is yours. What is important and key things which has happened recently?
Thank you, Claudius, and sorry from the very beginning, I will not be able to stop only on two key things, but I will definitely try to share my presentation for two blocks. Basically, looking back for the past 4 years, well, and I would say that how do I read the title of this panel? It's the state of association with European Union, right? But not only the state of implementation of the agreement. And this is exactly, and I see a lot of colleagues from public administration here who can say that this is exactly the feeling that we all have now in Ukraine, the association with the European Union. It's not only about implementation of the agreement. So looking back for the past 4 years, we can say that we've managed to settle all the scope of institutional capacity necessary to move this agenda forward on a daily basis, both in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at all branches of power in the government. All the ministries have empowered deputy ministers for European integration, and we have a very good mechanism of coordination of all these processes. This is, I would consider, a win-win of our Euro-integrational track. We have adopted the both political and technical agenda for implementation of the agreement. So I'm talking about the action plan for the implementation agreement, plus parliamentary governmental roadmap for legal acts which should be voted and adopted for these 2 years to implement the agreement. And once again, this is a point of political agenda because the leader of the government, the speaker of the parliament, and heads of all the parliamentary committees had a political consensus on the necessity to deliver on this part of the association agreement. We have the political agenda of our cooperation, which is unified between all branches of power, and also stated in the final 20th declaration of this year's summit. And I think that this is a very good, maybe it would not sound so positive, but that's a very good starting point after this for 4 years. And it really took us 4 years to make everybody run in the same direction, but not only with the same slogans. So I think this is the huge win-win that we have at this moment. And speaking of the way why we are talking about association with the European Union, now we understand that none of our country has a perspective of membership in the European Union. And what we were talking about is the necessity. Of course, we all have this ambition to go closer with the European Union, but still Ukrainian association agreement as a historically new format of agreement with the third country, which combines the experience of all previous agreements which have been concluded, has the combination both of EEA agreement, membership agreement, agreement with the Eastern Partnership countries. So we have all the possible configurations of obligations there, starting from internal market treatment, finishing with the scope of legal approximation, and also having purely declarative issues on rule of law and political cooperation. So we decided that before signing the letter with intention to join the European Union, we should start with implementing and using the resources of association agreement. And that was the essential part for us, because 4 years we spent in implementation of the association agreement on a unilateral basis. We adopted the legislation, we created and established institutions, and when this critical mass of obligations that have been implemented have been collected here in the government, we understood that it's getting more and more harder to work within the government and the parliament to advocate and to say, why do we have to adopt this scope of legislation? Why should it look like that? Why should we implement the directives? And we understood that we have to focus somehow. We have to work with the European Commission and to build the capacity of European Union to deal with Ukraine, not only as a third country with the European partnership, but also as a country having the biggest and the most ambitious association agreement within Europe. So, and this is exactly the spirit that we have back in the government for this year. And what we are lacking is, of course, closer and more broad cooperation with civil society. And I know that we've been blamed for all the time that not all decisions have been discussed or initiated or worked out with the civil society. I should apologize for that, but we all should be clear that we always doing something we want to do tomorrow, which have to be done yesterday. So this is the situation when we are here. So I would say that we're at a very good level of cooperation and association from the technical point of view, if assessing Ukraine from internal perspective, but we're only at the very beginning in terms of real association with the European Union based on the association agreement.
Thank you. Thank you indeed for this optimistic statement, indeed. I would take probably your phrase on and your emphasis on focusing association. It seems to me also a key issue at this stage of association, focusing it. I should admit myself, but I take this as a next big challenge of this nice agreement. I, by the way, contributed a little paper to this conference and to this session, which exactly was about focusing association and saying that it's probably too comprehensive, basically, to make it happen on all possible fronts. And Daniela, when we last met in I think in June, you were telling about, tens of laws which are being in the parliament, about European integration as dominating the agenda in the parliament and in the government. But at the same time, we know that there are some key issues in Moldova which are not functioning in essence. So how do you then see this possible to reconcile these very vast, horizontal, deep, really, basically provisions of the agreement and the need to focus on key problems in Ukraine, Moldova, or Georgia? Daniela, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A very complex question, which should be in a way tangled from different aspects. I don't think there are miracles, and all the work should be done from a certain point of view. And if that still we're facing challenges, it shows the need to continue to do reforms and to do the homework and to implement the commitments we have on the association agreement. It really shows how much we still need the association agreement, and we need the commitment and the support from the European Union and the member states, and the support of the civil society in order to deliver and to reach the goals that we have ahead of us. And I believe that it's important to focus, but at the same time not to really concentrate on just a few, because when you concentrate on a few, then the others will become the problem. This is why the association agreement is very complex, and this is the biggest challenge in order how to manage to cover horizontally all the segments in a different segment of the complexity. And also every sector has its own process of reform and how to put all of them together. And this was the biggest, in a way, challenge for us, how to do this coordination with all the institutions, which they already are in different processes of reform themselves, and they are coordinating different processes of reform horizontally, and also to take on board different, in a way, commitments. We, as already in a way mentioned, in these 4 years, we worked a lot on this, putting it together and having understanding where we are and what should be done in small steps. And this was the very difficult task for us, how to cut into small pieces, one a very difficult objective, and also to make sense that and sometimes really we have plenty of actions, but still we're not sure that doing all of those will implement the objective of a certain article or provision of the agreement. And the nature of the agreement is very different from chapter to chapter and from title to title, and the indicators are very different, and the capacities are also very different. And also Republic of Moldova been in a very difficult years, the past years, and also being without assistance, like in 2016, and also now, some of the actions are very costly, and also it took a lot of effort from ourselves to prioritize and how to do this balance in order to really do what is the most important as layers for the foundation in order to base the different other sectors. And also the coordination between the institutions. Also we been done a very revolutionary, I would say, reform of the government. I don't know how much you are aware. We cut from 16 ministries to 9. It was a cut of 1/3 of civil servants. For the size of the Republic of Moldova, to dismiss 1,000 of civil servants, this is a lot. This is huge. And also to continue with the same speed of effort. It was also a challenge, especially for the last year. And in the same time, not to lose speed and to put content and to concentrate on what is necessary to be in a way delivered. Even despite all these in a way challenges, I believe that the institutions managed to do a great job in order to do exactly what we planned, committed, and also we agreed that it's necessary for different provisions and part of the agreement. There are many reports. We produced our report for half a year, in July. It's a report of the Commission that was in the spring. Just last Monday, the civil society presented an alternative report, also having an alternative view. The Parliament, just end of August, also presented resolutions and implementation of the reports. We are aware where we are, what we managed to do and what is missing and what is pending. The challenge for us is how to put together the huge list of the laws, of the homework, of the Legal Harmonization Acts, and also the implementation provisions to be delivered. We have, you all know, we have elections in February, and we have the operational parliament until 30th of November. And now with all the line institutions, we are working hard to do priority of priorities. We have a list around of 100 laws for the association agreement that should be implemented by the end of this session of the Parliament. Even in the ideal scenario, to manage all of those, but we all know what it means, the legislative cycle, and also the amount of work needed for that, if to really follow all the transposition tables and all this in a way, and the necessary time for the consultation of the civil society and all this. Now we're trying to do priority of priorities of all those in order to really see what is key and crucial for that. And it's a huge effort for all the line institutions to focus and to deliver. In the past, we've also been through different cycles of elections. This is why at the technical level, institutions will continue to work, but we cannot make abstraction of elections and also the context that is going to be. Even maybe it's already felt in different parts of the society already. And this is why for us, it's how to make use. This is what we're trying now to have this all technical meetings and all the in order to see practically what we can do. Also, I know that statistics, like the good news, bad news, and statistics. This is why I don't know how much it's to use in this in a way format, but this is the only way to talk about such a huge, in a way, complex agreement in just a few elements. I would like to say about the legal harmonization. This is one of the very important elements where we're discussing with the Commission and the EAS, and also we have agreed on this very common criteria when it's considered like in a way done or not done, when it's already enforced and it's kind of according to the annexes. And again, this is one of the elements that institutions manage to deliver. We have a quite high rate of transposition. It's around 30-something% of the fully transposed and around 60% of the partially transposed. And if to put together with all the annexes we have in the agreement, it's approaching to half. Now again, the key word is implementation, how we manage to have all of those transposed like in real life through the mechanism, institutions, and also the local level. And this is in a way what we are working on. Beside and also beyond the association agreement, we have like different other commitments, like in the we're trying to, in the political dialogue, to take consideration the recommendations we receive in the council conclusions from the Foreign Affairs Council from February, from the like all the commitments we have in different other formats, like memorandum of understanding for the macrofinancial assistance. There are plenty of different other conditionalities that also on board on the list of the institutions. Also, like we cannot in a way avoid talking about the elephant in the room, that like following the political in a way developments and like the non-validation of the elections in this summer, like our political dialogue with you goes through a difficult moment, and I really hope that we'll find a way to be back on track in terms of the political dialogue. I really believe that only through dialogue and through like the support we will manage to deliver and to really do the necessary commitments and that we have already committed back home, and which everyone is like aware, and it's not that we're doing for someone, but it's for the citizens, for the country in itself. On the Eastern Partnership, we're like also looking at the process in itself. We are very active working for the implementation of the 20 deliverables by 2020. We're now like just finalizing a screening with all the line institutions to see where we are ourselves, like what we did nationally, in order to present it for the 4th of October when it's going to be the senior official meeting, and then preparing for the ministerial meeting in order to see on practical terms also our contribution. Also, we are grateful for this format of discussion. We, as discussed even before, and we are grateful that in the summit declaration already was agreed that it's necessary to have a platform where we can in a way discuss and talk. Even we're very committed to the inclusive principle, but there are many subjects which we kind of need, and it comes from the CFTA and different other aspects of the association agreement. We're very interested to like extend it, but I think this we will kind of discuss to the next question that we just now mentioned. Yeah, I will stop here because I think it's more than 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. It was a bit more, but I mean, really, what you were telling is indeed impressive about in terms of agenda, law harmonization agenda, and the scope of this agenda. Really, percentages what you are mentioning. But there is a question really, of course, whether this agenda can be implementable. So yeah, you can manage, of course, to pass even 100 laws probably this year, and even then 500 sub-laws. And then, I mean, there will be a big question about costing, about capacity building, and really 1,000 cut in public administration hardly seems as a classical capacity building exercise. So this can be a smart way, I mean, if it is combined with some probably new hirings, but it's a bit difficult to see. And if I may, there will be an opportunity to discuss it further on also and comment. But now I'm moving to Archil and Georgia, which I know the best among the three, because I've spent some time working there. And again, continuing on this scope and focusing, and whether it's possible, I may maybe provide a little introduction on one wonderful piece of EU legislation which is called Roadworthiness Directive. This is a very technical piece it's about, you know, vehicles conforming to certain standards. And there is a directive, there are several directives, there is a new one. And in fact, in Georgia, this seemingly very technical piece of EU legislation had posed quite important difficulties, because at some point, government, I think same thing happened also in Ukraine, abolished technical inspection of cars altogether as a source of unnecessary regulation and corruption. And then, for doing and implementing this directive, it was necessary to reintroduce this technical inspection of cars and then do checks on every car on the on the Georgian roads, which we calculated is about 1 million, at least 1 million cars.
Cars are million.
Yes, 1 million cars. And we also calculated what, for those cars circulating on the roads of Georgia, I mean, just to pass this roadworthiness directive, an investment in terms of, I mean, from 500 to 1,000 US dollars, because still Georgia becomes dollars, it would amount then to up to 1 billion US dollar investment in just implementation of just a single piece of this very technical legislation. Is it okay? Thank you. So basically, the ingenuity of the Georgian government, I would like to praise the ingenuity of the Georgian government, which finally passed this legislation and devised a plan. But they used a little trick, if I may confess. They a bit reduced the scope of the requirements, taking, again, small technical, little catalyzers off the list of the requirements. And those who've been to Georgia, probably they know that most of the Georgian cars are without catalyzers, because they imported from different places, and if it is important with catalyzer, they usually cut it, so not to waste resources too much. So basically, by cutting this requirement, Georgians, in fact, radically altered cost and benefit ratio for implementation of this directive, and now believe, I mean, this now could be implemented and kind of could be passed, and then probably at some point this requirement could be reintroduced. So I thought, I was fascinated to find it, and I find it a very, very smart way of implementing and focusing association agreement. So Arshil, would you agree with that? So what do you consider it a Georgian trick, or it can be a bit broader way of dealing with complexity, which was so well described by previous speakers?
Thank you, Claudius. I will start by answering on your very tricky questions. Question, in fact, one question. It really shows the complexity of reforms and shows the difficulties that we are facing while implementing these reforms. And this roadworthiness test for vehicles was really introduced, but not only this trick, some other tricks was also put in this introduction. First, it was regrouping of the vehicles itself by some categories, and it is not fully introduced yet even. So it is it started the check of the technical worthiness started with buses and big, some construction cars, I don't know. Then from the 1st of July of this year, government-owned cars are already eligible for this technical exercise, and from the beginning of the next year, all vehicles, absolutely all vehicles, should be checked.
So this was a kind of gradual approach.
Yeah, it was gradual approach. We do not. We actually follow the timelines that we have in the association agreement, because the final date is 2019 for the implementation of this particular requirement. About the catalyzers, you are absolutely right. This one detail was put it out from the list of requirements, which is quite huge because of high costs of these catalyzers that should be reintroduced into the cars. What this device is doing, it's actually cleaning the airs of the cars coming after passing the engine, and it also means that environment is not in a good shape if these catalyzers are not working. Some models of the cars do not need at all catalyzers. They are the modern cars, and that's why some complex approach was put it. In fact, in parallel with let's say this catalyzers issue, some incentives was introduced in order to change the composition of the vehicles park in Georgia, and VAT taxes, some other taxes also was redistributed in a way that electric cars are free from taxation, and we, of course, we are not producer, we are importing all of the vehicles. So there are no duties for electric cars. There are very small duties for hybrids, and very high taxes for cars with strong engines. I don't know how to say, which actually requires more fuel. This approach also works. And if you now see at the roads of Tbilisi, the percentage of the electric or hybrid cars increased enormously during just last 2 years. So environmental issue is also addressed, but at a different way. Also, of course, this catalyzers issue will not be forget forever. It will reintroduce at some point, but this, let's say, exclusion allows us not to be behind of the schedule of the association agreements that we have. We've agreed with the European Union. In general, I could say that reforms, all of the reforms, has some difficulty in its implementation. That's why sometimes you have to a little bit be flexible, find out the ways how to deal with it. And so is the coordination process as well. So like in Moldova, we also we introduced concept of the small government and reduced the number of the ministry to 10. We have one more, I don't know which is this one, but we have just 10 ministries right now, and we managed to keep the EU integration coordination structure working as it was before this reduction of the ministries. We updated all the legislative backup that supports the functioning of the European Commission, EU Integration Commission, headed by the Prime Minister. we actually updated and at the same time reshaped the annual plan as well, because responsibilities was distributed of the let's say merged ministries, redistributed, and we reshaped in fact a whole plan of for 2019. But we still are lacking respective changes in the electronic monitoring system, because we have this electronic monitoring system working on the implementation of the association agreement, but this electronic monitoring actually done for the previous composition of the government. I mean, thematic composition of the government. So the next tasks are, of course, update of the electronic monitoring system. At the same time, two important legislation was passed in terms of approximation of the legislation. Now submission of compliance tables for each individual legislation is necessary requirement for the, any legislative changes that also have some I don't know, connection with the EU integration process, and at the same time the guidelines was prepared and introduced that are helping all the respective bodies working on legislative changes in order to rightly prepare legislation itself related to the approximation of the with the EU law, and at the same time this compliance tables as well. So at the same time, we are looking forward to go to the 3 years planning. So right now we have just 1 year planning, but decision is already done to switch to the 3 year planning. So from the 2019, we will have one more detailed plan for 2019 and plus 2 years, 2021, more or less general plan for association agreement. In terms of achievement, let's say the thematic achievement, one consolidated fact that exports into the European Union of Georgian goods increased by 20% already speaks about our good performance in terms of DCFTA related reforms. At the same time, there were some other achievements in different areas, including in so-called OSH related, so safety at work related introduction of norms and standards, respective labor related norms and standards. What I could underline as well, some energy related issues, and we finalized respective energy efficiency plan. So it's also a topic in our cooperation with the European Union. Of course, some other, let's say, sectorial issues, I will not go deep into some details, but what I would like to say that we managed also to improve the cooperation institutions with the European Union. First, it was introduction of the strategic cooperation format on security issues. This year we will have the second meeting, and this was important achievement in terms of bilateral cooperation with the European Union. Second, this is of course establishment of the new format of cooperation. The first meeting will be in November this year. This is, let's say, high-level format between the government of Georgia and the European Commission. Will be chaired by the Prime Minister of Georgia and President of the European Commission, Mr. Juncker, from the EU side, will consist of ministers and commissioners. Main focus will be on sectorial issues. We would like to see the meeting concentrated not only on performance of the Georgia in terms of implementation of the association agreement, because we already have this kind of format. This is association council established by the agreement itself, but to focus more on some joint projects, some improving some communication, some links with the European Union. So it is really a new approach to our cooperation with the European Union, and we hope very much that this format will allow us to go forward in terms of practical steps of European integration. I already mentioned the roadmap that is exactly also aims to go even beyond association agreement. It will consist, we plan it to put some directions into the roadmap. I will underline some main, let's say, directions of our, let's say, planning. It will be also planning instrument. We plan to unify and make one unified EU integration plan that will be also consist of association-related topics, and roadmap will also be part of. Will be part of this unified plan. And what directions should be? We should going to focus on, of course, in addition to the association agreement. This will be more engagement and participation in EU agencies and programs, because we see another possibility, let's say additional possibility of close cooperation with number of European agencies in order to enhance institutional cooperation as well. We also are looking forward to screening of our legislation. So we will actually ourselves work on the finding of the gaps between the Georgian legislation and EU one in order to identify directions when we can go even beyond, as I already mentioned, association agreement. It will be a gradual process as well. We're also going to put some RIA instrument in order to identify only those directions for going beyond which will be beneficial for economy and for the development of the country, of course. This screening, we hope very much that the European Union or EU member state will be engaged as much as possible into this exercise in order to increase the credibility of the results of this gap analysis, and at the same time to gain some additional expertise in this direction. One additional, let's say, focus of the association agreement will be exactly the sectorial integration and some physical, let's say, infrastructure that will connect Georgia more with the European Union. And I think this new format will help us to go forward in terms of cooperation with the European Union on these issues. And of course, Eastern Partnership and 20 deliverables. Our attitude towards Eastern Partnership stays the same. We value very much this format. Of course, we are looking for more differentiation and more focus on associated countries, but at the same time, we would like to continue cooperation and enhance cooperation with other Eastern European countries. Armenia is showing new interests in some directions of also approximation with the European Union and at some extent even integration. So it means that we have ground for further cooperation with other countries of the Eastern Partnership, and we will include directions of this 2020 deliverables into also this roadmap and the United Plan. And of course, we already have some achievements in this regard as well in terms of implementation of these deliverables. Just a couple of weeks ago in Tbilisi, the European School was open with the participation of Commissioner Hahn. It was initially, speaking, his idea to establish these kind of schools in Eastern Partnership countries. Georgia is a first good example of it, and the school is already opened, but we have some additional plans even to enhance the scope of the activity of the school and let's say make the project as an exemplary for other the same kind of institutions inside Georgia, and maybe not only inside Georgia. So this is very shortly, Claudius. Thank you very much.
Achille. Indeed, I mean, yeah, it's good that finally European school has been opened. So again, small but very concrete deliverable. But finally, exactly, the word to the other side of association. This is Dirk Lorenz, acting head of division for relations with Eastern Partnership countries, European External Action Service. So Dirk, Archil mentioned several new initiatives like screening, like, you know, this high-level dialogue between governments and European Commission. There are some other things as well. So do you consider all these new ideas as good ways to make association work better? Should it work better? Basically, is there a need of any new kind of instruments for making association work fine and nice? Do you see also a problem of this comprehensiveness, a bit of tasks ahead of this country? So I know a lot of questions, but yeah, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, let me first perhaps also agree that a lot has been achieved already during the last year. We have the visa liberalization for all three in place. Some challenges with Georgia, but very good steps taken by the government to address them, which is very much appreciated also by the member states concerned. Trade has been mentioned, which continues to increase. Exports to the EU have improved for all three partners, and we have for all three partners the main trade partner. And also a number of companies involved in it is growing constantly, which also shows that it really brings tangible benefits to a wider audience and not just a small circle. And another area perhaps to highlight is people-to-people contacts, Erasmus+, which has many initiatives, and also in the field of tourism, where we're seeing increased exchanges. Then the 2020 deliveries for 2020 have been mentioned. Indeed, we will take stock of them at the ministerial, first at the senior officials meeting on the 4th of October, and then at the ministerial on the 15th of October. So the starting point is that the implementation of the association agreements generally works well, but also that a lot still needs to be done in order to fully reap the benefits of them. Now, how to achieve that? Of course, all the three partners have ideas, which are different and sometimes also overlapping, but also we should not forget that all three partners are in very much different situations. It's interesting to discuss now in this format with the three, and by the way, we shouldn't forget that also relations with the other partners have improved. We have finally been able to ratify, or to sign and to ratify by the parliament and by the Armenian parliament, the new comprehensive enhanced partnership agreement, and you know how painful the process was after the 3rd of September 2013 and the interest shown by other players in the region in the integration processes with us. But now we have an agreement in place, and it also contains the concept of approximation. So it's not completely different from the association agreements, of course, which of course remain in their own league because they are much more comprehensive and much more concrete than the one with Armenia. But also we're negotiating with Azerbaijan and even with Belarus. Political conditions were such that progress could be achieved by establishing a coordination group. Now maybe a few words country by country. Let me start by Georgia. Indeed, we will have for the first time this meeting, college to Georgian government meeting. How we will call it, what we will discuss, we still have to work closely together, I believe. But indeed, it's a concrete outcome of the discussions which we had also following the presentation of your roadmap. And it's a good format, I think, for our relations to address a number of areas. In addition to the other dialogues we have also established, and you mentioned rightly, I think, the security dialogue where we are working closely together, and we will have the second one very soon. On Ukraine, I think what is important to note is that the context in which we are developing our association. We still have the ongoing conflict in the east. We still have Russia's aggressive stance now in the Azov Sea also. And we cannot take it for granted that an association agreement in this context is easily being implemented, and that's why we appreciate a lot the steps taken by Ukraine and what has been achieved. Here I see a few areas also where we should focus, and we should highlight a few we were asked, and there I would single out the fight against corruption, now with the establishing of the High Anti-Corruption Court, the selection of the judges, and also in a number of sectoral chapters in the association agreement, more needs to be done, for example, customs, where more reforms are needed. And of course, we hope that the reform momentum will be kept also in view of the upcoming elections, and that we communicate well together on what our working together means. And sometimes maybe we don't just need or shouldn't just reflect on new formats for the association or under the association. We should perhaps repackage also what we are doing together to better give it more visibility and to show to the population the concrete results of what we are doing, because there I think at least the EU always was rather weak, and I think the partners also could improve. In some countries it's more needed than in others. In Georgia, for example, I think the support of the population is overwhelming for EU integration, but still we shouldn't just lean back and take it for granted that it will remain this way. In Ukraine we have this very large campaign working together, moving forward together, where we try to communicate, but also more needs to be done there. Now, this brings me to my last of the three countries, Moldova. Here I'm in a very difficult situation because I sit next to Daniela, whom I value very much, and her work and the work of her team. And I think I cannot agree more with you when you say that the times are difficult for the political dialogue between the EU and Moldova. If everybody was like you, there wouldn't be such difficulties, but unfortunately, this is not the case. And we cannot close our eyes towards the worrying developments in the country with the invalidation of the elections of the Chisinau mayor, with the electoral reform against fundamental recommendations of the Venice Commission, with the adoption of the fiscal package, which raises concerns in terms of possible money laundering. And all this against the background of the Council conclusion, which were published in February, where I think very clearly also EU concerns were stated. And I think the actions which need to be taken are clear. They are on the table, and we're really looking forward to them being addressed in order to have a faithful implementation of the association agreement, in particular the independence of the judiciary, which is a prerequisite, of course, to keep economic growth, and economic reforms, where Moldova has advanced a lot in the fiscal system, generally on trade, on economy, very good steps. But the overall political concerns remain for the rule of law, and there we hope really that that steps are being taken to address them. And in these circumstances, of course, it will be very difficult to think jointly about other formats for cooperation in the association framework. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. So there could be many questions following, and probably they will follow, but as promised now, I would like to take some questions from the audience, if there are any. Yes, I see Darius, I see you, yeah, you, so four of you, so Darius was first.
Hello, if I may ask two questions. First, about something which I find missing in the presentations. Only the two speakers mentioned public administration reform, but only in a negative sense. We mentioned cuts and in size. So first of all, if you could briefly mention, because that's, I'm preempting a little bit of tomorrow's discussion about the right sequencing, but you start with people, and then without people you cannot run the approximation machines. And especially would like to know what's going on now in Ukraine, since European Commission did an unprecedented support package to finance reform posts. And so where are they? Are you happy with the number of people, quality, salaries, etc.? And in a similar way, and I understand it's a simultaneous project in the three countries, and I understand also that European Commission staked a lot of credibility so it's some sort of flagship initiative across the three. So that's one question. And the second, if you could also, I don't know whether to address it to the European Commission or Moldova. There was something in your presentation, Daniela, that you mentioned that you were discussing about what really counts as a job done. So what was the answer? I mean, you were discussing with, I understand, European Commission, where you can really tick the box. I mean, whether it ends with passing of the law or something more. So what was the agreement? How do we measure progress? So maybe both sides could comment. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe could I take more questions? Yeah, because I mean it will take a bit long, I'm afraid. So I had first, yes, lady. Yeah, I saw you. Yes, Kasia, then let you.
Thank you. My name is Anneberto, German Technical Cooperation, GIZ. Thank you very much to the whole panel for this very comprehensive outlines of the state of association and beyond. I have two questions to the guests from Moldova and from Georgia. I start with Georgia. It's very interesting to hear about these new formats of cooperation, bilateral cooperation. Can you reveal or single out already expected outputs of this new format, which is not the Association Council? You mentioned some sectoral cooperation, if possible. And is this roadmap already available that you spoke about? And the question to Daniela would be a bit more lengthy, I guess. Very impressive also your description of restructuring public administration. So with regard to the PAR process, how do you manage to build your capacities for prioritization of the association process, and also of this what we described very nicely, from regulation to deregulation and back to regulation within the scope of association agreement? Thank you very much.
Very difficult questions, but a bit more, because yeah, that's promised. Kasia, the floor is yours.
Hello, I'm Katharina Wolczak from Chatham House and Birmingham University. I happen to concluded a large piece of work for the European Parliament, and one of the unexpected byproducts of this research was the issue of ownership of the association agreements within the EU institutions. And it's not only from our colleagues here from the three associated countries, but many EU experts and staff in the EU delegations complained about the workload and the unrealistic expectations in terms, for example, commenting on draft laws, whether they comply or not. And the issue is for me that comprehensiveness and complexity of the agreement presents not only challenge for the associated countries, but for the EU institutions themselves. And the feeling is, not only amongst the countries, but the people working on the implementation from the EU side, that that mechanism doesn't seem to, in terms of capacity, in individual parts of the Commission, where one person may be working on 14 ENP countries and not being able to devote sufficient attention. There were a couple of DGs which are mentioned, so I wonder if there is any stock taking within the EU institution in terms of the support, and if what solutions are proposed. Thank you.
Okay, that's basically for Dirk, I understand mostly. Yeah, the fourth and then the last question.
Thank you. I have two questions, but very brief.
One better.
But really brief. I mean, first is there anything in your association agreements which you think is not doable at all, or you think it was wrong to subscribe for something, for a certain, I mean, piece of reform or a certain piece of, you know, of big action in the association agreement? That's first question. And second question, I mean, legally, both EU and the partner countries are equal parts in the agreement, but it happens like usually the three countries report to the EU and civil society reports how it is implemented, the association agreements and so on. But is there any dialogue in the reverse direction? Do you ask EU how it's implementing its part of the association agreement? Is there any such dialogue? And how is, I mean, if you could comment on this part. Thank you.
Is there any obligation? Yeah. And final question, I hope.
Yes, Philippe Delara from Paris. First, I would like to brief remark on what Alexander Sushko said about keeping alive the patient in civil society. You could speak in very similar terms about civil society in old founding members of EU. And then I come to my question, which may be inappropriate, but as we say in French, je mets les pieds dans le plat. Two of the association countries may be considered at war, and the three of them have an occupation, partial occupation of the territory issue. And I ask to the three of them to which extent the EU partners you are dealing on a daily basis are aware and consider this situation of your country, which obviously cripples the implementation of the association.
So the first round of questions is closed. Then we go for the answers. I understand there are two very precise questions, one for Daniela and one for Dirk, and then I understand other questions are for all of you, therefore I would prefer Daniela and Dirk to speak first.
Thank you very much for the questions. I will start in a certain order, but I'll try to cover all. Regarding the public administration reform, as I said, it was a revolutionary for all of us, and it was resistance. We're still now trying to settle down, like, and to be operational in this new status quo. There have been many opinions on that, if it was efficient, not efficient. I'm a promoter, even I was not a promoter of the reform itself, I was kind of been part of that, but like if it always like should be in action, like the status quo, it's like no, doesn't bring anything. In order to move, like you should also move and to adjust in the process. And this was the only, because usually everyone is complaining that we don't have good quality in the civil servants because the the most professional people are not coming because of the salaries. And the only way having high salaries was to do cuts in order, and this was the only possibility, having IMF agreement, in order from the budget that is offered for the salaries to remain the same, and then to be able for the smaller team to be divided in like to be substantially increased in the salaries. It's painful, but it's the only way to still motivate people to remain, because I don't know how it's about Georgia and Ukraine, but we still have different flows of people coming, having a training, being operational, then leaving. And this was one of, it's not ideal, but it's one of the options trying in a way to invest in the civil servant. And it was also to be more operational, to be like in the team, and also we had several screenings of efficiency, like several departments that didn't deliver, that was not necessary, or overlapping in the system, and this is a try. We managed to, in the process, to continue to be operational, also to see the good part of it. Of course, it's not perfect. There's some elements that should be still kind of put the links together, but I think it's an important step forward. We still should give a little bit of credibility and time for this reform to really have the roots, and then to talk about the about the capacity also. It's very linked to that. We kind of really believe to have better quality and the good ones to remain and to stay in the system. I don't know also in how other teams, but sometimes the majority and the biggest bulk of the effort is done by a smaller team. And it's very important to pick and to really motivate those ones to stay in the system. And this, it was the spine of the idea of the reform. It's of course easier to say than to really do it. Like if to really go in every single ministry, I'm not confident that the best person managed through this process to really, of course, when it's human people, emotions and all this process, it's very much there, especially in a small country as the Republic of Moldova. We've passed through that, like I can talk about this a lot because it was a lot of emotions, but I really believe in that it will manage to get us better and to be small and to be maybe faster in some of reforms, because the most usually the often asked question is what's the most difficult thing to do from the association agreement. Usually I cluster the actions in several. It's about resources, it's about like some of the actions which are very new for us and we need to gather knowledge, and the third, which is the most difficult, it's about coordination. And when you have a bigger team, like usually it's more difficult, and also it's interest of different line institutions, like all this took a lot of time and sometimes like effort and arguments for conviction. This is why we believe that this will help us to get better. But still the human resources remains as a constant priority for us. And it's not something that we did and like it's done, like we should permanently do it. I think I will cover on that. Regarding the joint indicators.
Daniela, but maybe, I mean, just one point probably, you know, in Ukraine, European Commission has pioneered a revolutionary approach. I mean, not tried everywhere. So to finance civil servants via these reform teams. So far it's only in Ukraine, I understand, up to 2,000 even posts, I mean, should be or are being financed. So may I ask just what is your experience, maybe, because I mean, a usual way would be why not to extend it to others and to see it. So yeah, but what is your evaluation, Olga?
I'll try to be brief, but indeed I'm really grateful to Darius that he outlined this issue, which is a principle and key to us also. Actually, looking back for the past year when we had this situation with the new salaries and new competitions for reform posts, I would consider it as a very good communication campaign. So there was a very good communication campaign to form the competition on the labor market for public officials, to enhance the internal resources of those public officials who are not that much efficient for their small salaries, because they knew that the new blood will come, new experts will come, and they may be fired or might be not that valued as they were before. So this is very good about communication, about competition, but by the end of the day, now when we see all these newly appointed or selected experts, we invested a lot in training and etc. I can see that by the end of the day, the best ones are not those who have the highest salaries, even though if they are from the reform stuff, this line. And this is something where I can completely agree with Daniela. You cannot really shape the process when you're dealing with people. It is very various. So we were trying just to hire 2,000 public officials to solve the perfect people who will do the huge reforms. But by the end of the day, it's very much about personal capacity, personal motivation. And from the perspective of public administration, it is unprecedented investment into people, not into processes, into recommendations, and etc. It's a huge investment in people, which really boosted all the public administration and, let's say, refreshed the old administration and made some professionals come to the public administration. But by the end of the day, it's about very personal approach.
Okay, please, you can
no,
comment.
I just wanted to build on that, because I personally believe that the change comes like from this transformation of every individual, and it's kind of depending which way it's done. But this is exactly what we want as the end result of implementation of the entire association agreement. And we would like that this experience to be multiplied in the Republic of Moldova.
Yeah, I see. If I mean to take this issue, just before probably passing the floor to you, Dirk, on this also. I know, Archil, what Georgia has also tried, this approach, but it was not financed by the EU at some point. It was financed by, I think, Soros Foundation at the beginning. It was in years when...
I do remember. It was 2004, actually, when the initiative started working. The special fund was created for some... in fact, making some particular, identifying some particular agencies which need support or are most important, let's say, at the same time, for the functioning of the government at that time, and just adding bonuses to the salaries. But these bonuses was at that time in Georgia salaries was really low. I was working at that time. I was head of department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I don't remember, and my salary was about $100, not more. Yeah. And these bonuses was quite sufficient. I was lucky to get into this list, which was not very long at that time, of the Gaga officials who were getting these bonuses, and it was like 300, 400 each month of USD, and it was really a good relief for governmental officials at that time. Of course, right now salaries in Georgia are much higher than salaries plus bonuses at that time, and we are also at that time. This initiative works quite well, because some let's say very wide-thinking and well-qualified people came to governmental structures, and in fact. Even today, in many governmental institutions, these people still continue to work for the government, and they are really like a basis and good institutional knowledge already, and let's say strong anchors of the all the reforms that are that were started in very early in 2004. So at that time it was a right approach, I could say. But
not
today,
for
for now there are different. So carrot was changed into something different. Today we have a. We also have this public administration reforms going on very intensively among the institutions. A lot of novelties, new legislation introduced just last year. A lot of novelties at practical level as well, including assessment system for everyone, for all civil servants. So there are a lot long, let's say, lists of how the people should be assessed about some incredible and possible and impossible components to be assessed, and everyone is assessed, and it's supposed that this could be a basis for meritocracy, and people should be then promoted or vice versa, demoted according to these assessments, and it's really a difficult and unusual exercise, frankly speaking, for Georgian institutions. But this is what is done at this particular moment. Yeah.
Dirk, I don't know whether you would like to comment on this issue of reform teams. Probably this is a matter for European Commission more than from External Action Service, but probably, and also, I mean, you have a question really, what about resources on the EU side? So its lack was notorious, or has been notorious for years, basically, and of course one can just commend these small troops what European Commission at that time, for example, was gathering during enlargement process to Central Eastern Europe, where units they're dealing with issues, and on the other side hundreds of peoples were involved, I mean, in the then associated countries. So do you feel, I mean, this issue same way as Kasia has put it?
On the first question, I would like not to comment because I don't have good comments to make, but I will do it anyway. We have discussed this also previously. For the time being, it is not on the table to extend it to other countries. And if we look at assistance to Moldova, I think the mood of the day would also be for future actions to focus on direct and tangible benefits to the citizens rather than on support for state institutions. But that does, of course, not exclude further discussions on that in the future. On the other question, I'm very grateful for such reports and remarks because I couldn't agree more. We are under a very heavy workload. For example, the division which I represent here, we are less than 25 people covering all the 6 partners. We are, in addition to the association agreement work, we are a briefing factory with 650 official briefing requests per year. And whenever it's urgent, there's no official request, you just get a phone call. So it's even more because it shows, I mean, the good thing is it shows the interest also of our political leaders in the countries. Because whenever the presidents or Mogherini meets interlocutors, but very often your countries are being discussed, and you try to be up to date with these briefings, of course. When it comes to the association agreement implementation, also we have to acknowledge that the resources are very differently spread among the delegations in particular. Ukraine is in a rather good situation, I would say. Not that they have nothing to do, they're also very busy, but they are at least large in numbers, comparatively large in both the political and the cooperation section. But if you look at Georgia or Moldova, it's almost mission impossible for the colleagues to fulfill this task. And the same holds true for some of the lineages. Plus, the problem is that the mission budget is very limited, so that we cannot send all the colleagues who would need to go to meetings actually to all the events which take place in the partner countries. But the good news is that it is likely that there will be more money for the neighborhood in the next multi-financial framework. Hopefully also ring-fenced, so that it has not been shifted away from our countries in view of the enhanced flexibility which shall be built into this instrument, but still hopefully, as I said, ring-fenced for this region. Then the question, of course, comes also, what does it mean if we have even more money in the future? Will we also have more staff to deal with it? But that's a question for the budgetary authority, and as you know, we're in times, difficult financial times, it's unlikely that our staff will be increased. On the contrary, we have to cut 1% of the staff per year. So I'm afraid we have to live with what we have, but what helps is that really the people I've met who work on these countries are very motivated. It's also a choice you make when you go to such a division. People are aware of the workload, but they make the choice because they really want to work on these countries, which also is, I think, a key area, a priority area also for the European Union in its foreign policy, also an area where we can make a difference, maybe more than in some other parts of the world.
Thank you, dear. I know, but Olga and Daniela leaving soon, so I am giving just an opportunity to answer last questions and make probably last statements.
Thank you, Claudius. I really want to answer all the questions, actually, because they are all very interesting and are very highly on the agenda. And I will start from the one of the last ones, which Katerina asked and Dirk just answered, about the capacity of the Commission. It's a huge challenge for us also, because we are very ambitious, and of course we understand that we cannot move forward with the bilateral implementation of the agreement without Commission being able to deliver on its side of the Commission commitment on assessment of Ukraine, starting from very technical issues of assessment of compliance tables and finishing with a very complicated issue of ticking the boxes. While you cannot form the unified methodology for all the boxes, it's very hard to tick the box when Ukraine can require the internal market treatment. Okay, that's one procedure. The other procedure is for the less complicated obligations. So we understand that this is not the capacity which might and probably even should be built within the European Commission and European External Action Service, and we were looking for different solutions. And we stopped on two solutions. So we're preparing the compliance tables for all the scope of legal approximation before each meeting of the bilateral bodies on sectoral issues, and we're considering this analytics and non-papers and taking internal decisions at the bilateral level on the scope of legal approximation and its progress. But from the other side, we've also examined the experience of the countries of European Economic Area. And just for the example, we should not blame ourselves, because in DG Trade there's only one desk officer dealing with the EEA, and one desk officer for Ukraine and for Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. So we are not in the worst position, I would say. But what was the solution? The special institutions so-called legal approximation hub was established. This is the number of experts who are on a daily basis making compliance analysis and issuing the conclusions both for the country and for the European Commission. You might know, and they're based in Brussels. And this is the type of model we will be trying to introduce in the phase 2 of the Association for You project, which is a EU-financed project to support Ukrainian implementation of the association agreement. We're establishing the legal approximation hub with both international experts, national experts, and junior assistants for all the experts. So this is the solution we find, and we believe that it will only enhance our political ambitions to that. But also I would like to answer the question about what wasn't worst of putting in the association agreement, as was asked by our Romanian colleague. I would say in terms of Ukrainian association agreement, because I myself participated in the negotiations, and from the very first day until the last day before signature, all Ukrainians members of the negotiation team were considering that we will sign the association agreement with the membership perspective and with perspective of visa liberalization. But the miracle didn't happen. We signed the association agreement without, it is very important just to know, without membership perspective, but with membership ambitions in its wording. And it is very complicated and extremely complicated to communicate it to MPs and politicians. Why would Ukraine have to reform its climate policy within... That was me talking. Why would Ukraine have to reform its climate policy within 1 year? And what will happen if we will not do it? And the answer is nothing, actually. Yes, but it is not possible to do it within 1 year. So I would say for us, for those people which are present here around, it's absolutely clear that this is our European choice, that we have to move forward, we have to follow the deadlines, but it is not the reality all the rest of the country and all the rest of politicians and all the rest of fight against corruptors and deregulators are living. And so this is so far the hugest challenge for us.
Thank you. And Daniela?
Thank you. I resonate a lot with the what was said of the experience of Ukraine of negotiating the agreement. We also negotiated with the faith that everything it's for the benefit of Moldova, and this is the best recipe to modernize Moldova. There's still now some discussions on some transition periods, like for some years on some of the provisions. Like the question sometimes it's about the implementation, especially on the areas where there are not clear indicators and there are 28 best practices and sometimes several others in the Western Balkans. And then the key question and the fight is between institutions, which is the right model and way to follow. And usually also we have expertise from outside, or you have advisors, and sometimes we're following one model, then we are understanding that it's not really that one, we're amending to another model. And sometimes this is in a way the most the question and the challenge. Also we're having discussion about the negotiations of the agreement in the discussion on the like with the skepticals, the ones that they don't believe in the association agreement. And this is one of the lessons learned we have from the communication, that it's not only to communicate about European integration to the ones who are in favor, but to the ones who are skeptical or against. And here we need a different message with different tools and different ways of doing that, and also explaining about the content about this. And it's more in a different in a way nature and discussion than saying, for example, it was not negotiated in a certain way because it's a difficulty on the implementation, but it's more about just being skeptical about the whole idea. And here we need a different in a way approach, and we're also trying to work now also building on this in a way lesson. Regarding the indicators, as I said, in agreement it's very, very different, and we also work ourselves on indicators, but and we have 5 types of actions in our national action plan. We have laws that transpose the key. We have bylaws that transpose the key, and we have measures for implementation. Especially for the legislative part, the normative part, the indicator that we agreed in the joint committees and subcommittees and all that, we only calculate when it's already entering into force. Doesn't matter it was approved by the government, or it's passed in the parliament, or it was passed in all the readings in the parliament. For us, it's important to enter into force. And this is one of the clear, in a way, element where we're trying, in a way, to look and also to work with line institutions who have the same understanding. Also, we work together with project like with the UK government, but also with several actors from the civil society on indicators from the DCFTA, and we took the ownership of all these indicators to take them on board and to evaluate every action according to all those indicators for the DCFTA. But still there are several other parts where we need to discuss every time when we agree on some actions, what exactly do we mean and what is the impact of a certain action. Regarding the if we discuss about EU, about the EU in a way commitments, these are like the usual meetings that we have in all the formats from the subcommittees, on all the clusters, on the association committee and association council. These are the formats being created and operational under association agreement, where we discuss generally. But indeed, because again, as I said, we're starting from the first point, we took commitments because we believe that this is in our interest, and usually we are reporting on those because we are interested to see if they are really according to the standards and legislation that it should be, and have the same in a way reading. Of course, on what EU should deliver, we are discussing. Usually it's also on assistance, on support, on expertise, and we fully embrace the idea of assistance coming together with the conditionalities. I still, what I'm also mentioning, it's very important that conditionalities to be proportional and balanced. I usually have also in mind this famous quotation that of Einstein, of like, do not judge a fish by its capacity to climb a tree because it will die frustrated. And this is why it's very important to be able to like put the necessary requirements to the certain context and like elements, and also the circumstances and processes. But in general, like, we have a full understanding of the processes from the both sides. Regarding it was a question about the Transnistrian conflict. We are looking at the settlement, like the European integration, as a part that can contribute to the settlement and the reintegration of the country. We have already good examples. Like the DCFTA in the Transnistrian region, it's more than 60%, which indirectly helps the region to comply with the EU standards. Even it's very difficult to recognize and to name them accordingly. We also have a huge number, like increased number of Transnistrian companies doing trade with EU. It's like also being registered under Moldovan authorities. And also the Republic of Moldova went through the assessment for the animal origin goods of caviar in order for a company from Transnistrian region to have this right to export to the EU. Another example is the visa liberalization. Having this inclusive approach, even we had these ways of promoting that Moldovan citizens residing in Transnistrian region to have the Moldovan passports. It was never so attractive as afterwards. And even in 2014, we had around 30,000 Moldovan passports in Transnistrian region. Now we have around 150,000. It's an increase of 5 times almost. We believe that it's very important to find even more other sectorial areas where this, in a way, cooperation will make it irreversible and will help like the reintegration of the country in practical, in a way, terms. Also, about the question on capacity I mentioned before, the Ukrainian colleague explained about the importance on the capacity and the effort to have this legal approximation hub or something. It was in a way mentioned. We, and together I think the Georgian colleagues already expressed several times on different occasions about maybe a joint, in a way, need, because we're coming with the same requests to the Commission, to ES, because we have the same challenges, and we expressed that maybe for us or for all the 6 Eastern partners will be the need this legal approximation facility maybe a platform at the EU level where you could help all of us with certain expertise or to guide us in certain very difficult in a way processes. And we discussed this before the summit of the Eastern Partnership very actively. It's still not in the declaration, and maybe it's an opportunity for all of us to find a practical way. I fully understand, and I'm trying to be as realistic as possible with the Brexit, with the next multi-annual financial framework, to find one platform maybe that can be also to save resources from the both sides, but in the same time to help us to advance on this. I think I don't know if I didn't cover any of the questions. Please let me know.
I think you did it wonderfully.
And
so yep.
just I'm really sorry. I really need to run to the airport, and this is why if there's some other elements I will miss.
Exactly.
I just wanted to say, like maybe I will miss your question about the cooperation of three of us. I just wanted in a way to highlight and to reiterate once again our interest and commitment to cooperate and to explore the possibilities. Even everyone already mentioned how much it's already in the pipeline to do bilaterally, but also take consideration how many are on the plate of the European Union, also in its perspective how it's going to be the process. I think on certain elements we can be a joint voice and to be more vocal, and also maybe to be more efficient in terms of resources, because some of the very different projects like environment, energy, digital, transport, I think also for you it's easier to work and to cooperate with us in a bigger projects. And these are the areas which we're interested to extend beyond the DCFTA, which we will discuss tomorrow in Brussels. And the last note, like to be in a positive, for us, the key priority is how to manage, and I would like maybe you also to help us in the brainstorming in the next 2 days, what can be the sectors, the elements, the projects, the actions that will help us to plant the seed of irreversibility back home, because it's even through all these examples I already gave, DCFTA, visa liberalization, and many others, it looks like it's already there, but we're still fragile, and I think it's still important to grow it more and to have more seeds of the reversibility. And here I would also be interested to see some of the practical elements and the ideas from your side. Thank you, and I really wish you fruitful discussions today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Indeed. Applause is welcome. So, in fact, I mean, we still have time for probably a couple of more questions. And yeah, I see one, I see two. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Krzysztof Bobiński from the Civil Society Forum of the Eastern Partnership, and I was just going to ask if this is the moment to ask about the effect of the elections, the forthcoming elections on the whole association process. But I think that as everyone seems to be leaving, maybe this isn't the moment. So.
Yes.
Thank
Probably.
you.
I mean, probably we can discuss it tomorrow. I mean, really.
I mean,
so.
do we think that the result of the election in Moldova will stand, or will it be disallowed by the court system again, or something like that? But we can talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you.
And
my name is Peter Havlik from Vienna. My question was in fact to Mrs. Morave about this Transnistrian agreement and so on. But this is somehow related to Georgia as well, because the problem is about the impact of the implementation of association agreement on these non-controlled territories. How is it in Georgia, and do you think that, for instance, Moldovan example could be used as a blueprint for moving forward in Georgia in this direction as well?
So you have less competition for time now after ladies left. So feel free.
Thank you, Claudius. Let me start with some other question that also was addressed to Georgia. It was about this new format of cooperation and what kind of outputs we expect from it. As I already mentioned, we would like to see the format working on more practical results. It could be a joint projects, this could be a joint initiatives that will enable us to develop maybe some connecting infrastructure or possibilities of the country to be able more at practical level address the EU integration related challenges, and of course increase the resilience of our institutions and economy in general. This is, let's say, generally. At the same time, we identified some, we are in the process of identification of some clusters. First will be for trade and economy. Second, we are thinking about infrastructure and connectivity. Third, about people-to-people contacts. Maybe there will be a separate cluster for climate, environment. We are thinking about this cluster approach, which will enable us to focus on some particular issues and at the same time not to, let's say, lose the overall scope of wide scope of our cooperation. In terms of the next question was about roadmap. It is not available yet. The first draft exists, but it is in Georgian, and it is very initial one, frankly speaking. So we are working on further improvements. We would like the document to be prepared before EU-Georgia Association Council, where the Council will help place. It is not still fixed. We are discussing with the European Commission the possible dates for the Association Council as well. These are most. We expected that it will be in December this year, but there is not. There is still, let's say, no decision from the EU side. About the conflict with Russia, first of all, because this is really Russia-inspired everything that was happening on the territory of Georgia, starting with very early 90s. What is our approach and how EU integration process is reflected in this direction. So we prepared a new initiative that was just a couple of months ago widely announced. This is a step to better future, the name of the initiative, and this initiative exactly focuses on sharing of all the benefits that are available for Georgian citizens, including, and this is especially mentioned in this initiative, and it is followed by the respective program as well, including laws that are coming from the association agreement with the European Union and from the relations and the cooperation with the European Union, to make these benefits available also for the citizens of Georgia, and we perceive the people that are living on occupied territories as the citizens of Georgia to make available for those that are living inside occupied territories. Unfortunately, unlike Moldova, in case of Georgia, Russia is stricter in terms of putting any possible impediments not to allow confidence building between people living on occupied territories and the rest of the territory of Georgia, and to somehow close all the possible links and contacts between these two groups of people. we speaking very openly, very openly on various international fora. We call it policy of putting of barbed wires or building a new Berlin Wall. I don't know how it, you can choose how to call it, but in practice this is what happening. They are putting barbed wires. They are putting, let's say, they are closing any possible passes and checkpoints. Just 2 checkpoints remain, one in Sofia City and one in Abkhazia right now. And they're preventing even physical contacts between the people living on the both sides of the occupation line. And those who remain on these territories, and I could say that there is a demographic catastrophe that is happening on these territories because they are widely depopulated. For example, this so-called Trinwali region or South Ossetia, the population is just 30,000 people that remains. If you to give you a better picture, this is in fact just a Russian military base, which is in number about 6,000 military servants, and the only let's say source of income for the locals living is exactly serving this military base. Even budget, there no economy exists at all. Nothing is working, and 95 even more percent of income of the so-called budget of so-called South Ossetia is direct transfer of money from Russia budget, and the rest 5 or 4% is just multiplication of this money that returns then. And yeah, it's just a military basis of Russia established on the heart of Georgian territory in order to have a, let's say, this brutal leverage on the policy of our country, or what it is done. You most probably understand well. So that's why it's very difficult to implement the programs I mentioned like this. So, but we are trying our best. We really, let's say, let's have a practical side as well. This initiative, Step to Better Future. Our healthcare services, free of charge, are available for the citizens of these occupied territories. Which are in fact deprived of normal medical treatment inside these territories. Educational programs are working for them. We even prepare special neutral, status neutral documents in order to, if they have some problems with Georgian identification, let's say marks or numbers, they will receive these neutral documents that will enable, that are enabling them to use any services state is providing to its citizens. In terms of visa movement, of course, they need Georgian passport, otherwise it is impossible. And the trend exists also, and more people is getting Georgian passport, but they're widely punished inside these territories. And if you have, in case of Moldova, situation more or less normal in terms of pressure on the population. In case of Georgian conflict, these so-called local authorities are fully controlled by Russia, and even non-governmental organizations are under permanent control in order not to enable them to get into cooperation with their counterparts in Georgia and so on. So it is unfortunately the reality. We are trying to do what is possible, but Russia is trying to close windows and doors where we could find the, let's say, ways of establishing of contacts with these people.
Yeah, thank you, Achille. It's a long and painful story, but I think it's clearer now for everybody. I mean, the situation on the ground. I understand there are other issues, of course, to be discussed, but our time is basically close. Dirk, would you like to add something? I mean, yeah.
A few brief points, if I may. First of all, we fully support Georgia's territorial integrity, and we fully support the new initiative for peace, which is we believe very good, and we hope that it will meet with more positive reactions also. One point I want to make, which is very important to us from the perspective of the EU institutions, and that is that lately we more frequently hear there is no membership perspective in the association agreements. Does it make sense to implement them? In a very general term, in a nutshell. And that is, of course, a bit sad, because we believe that the undertakings, the reform commitments contained in the association agreement are for the benefit of the citizens, irrespective of whether or not the country might one day become a member state of the European Union. And also, in the discourse, it's dangerous because it might play into the hands of those who do not want actually countries to become closer to the EU. Also, I would like to add that the enhanced cooperation, be it in the format of the three or bilaterally with the EU, needs to stay in the framework of the existing association agreements. It's simply unrealistic, I would argue, now to go through a process of amending the association agreements with full ratification in however 28, 27 member states of the European Union in the future. And also the agreements do not exclude further developments in our relations, as it is clearly also stated in the preambles. And that we have half a sentence in the Eastern Partnership Summit Declaration from last November on engaging with the three partners on association-related reforms, I would argue is already an achievement, given the different views we have among the member states and the need for unanimity among them to agree on the text. And now it's for us jointly to decide how we can use it and implement it. As it was said, tomorrow is the first step, the meeting, trade informal ministerial with the three, and other steps I'm sure will follow. But what is also clear from our perspective, that the Eastern Partnership as such has an added value, and there are also many things to be discussed among all six, because in many areas there are common challenges, and therefore the Eastern Partnership should remain an inclusive format and concept. But that does not mean that we couldn't go ahead in some areas, of course, with the three. And the last point on the elections in Moldova, I only partly heard it because I was kissing Daniela when you asked, but I think what is clear, we will follow the developments in Moldova in the run-up to the elections, and we will monitor election day and beyond. And also when we look at the composition of the parliament, it does not necessarily reflect the outcome of the previous elections. Therefore, it's an issue high on the agenda, and as you know, we have put on hold budget support payments and macro-financial assistance in view of recent developments, and we need to see the implications of the elections for multi-party democracy in the country.
Thank you. In fact, I mean, we can start discussion now on the next topic, which Dirk also raised, whether this agreement, association without integration is a really sufficient and really should be an end in itself. Basically, whether implementation of the agreement should be only subject on it. Indeed, I belong, for example, to those who think that an agreement in itself is not passing the cost-benefit somehow test, and just logically it needs further steps like economic integration, further economic integration with the European union through economic space or other arrangements. But exactly this is a good opportunity to announce tomorrow's, of course, conference and session, which exactly the title is Integration Without Membership. So morning session, session number 2, will be exactly about this thing. So thanks so far all of you, and especially thank you panelists, Archil, Dirk, ladies have left, but we applauded them. And thank you for your patience, for your entertaining questions and participation. Zoriana, would you like to add something?
Probably I should also thank you for the great moderation. But considering that we have empty places here, I suspect that there has been some informal discussion of association agreement implementation going on outside of this room, so I kindly ask others to join. But before that, I have to make an announcement, otherwise our communication manager would kill me. Because communication is everything, and our today's meeting and tomorrow's and after tomorrow's is streamlined. So if you know colleagues who are interested in the topic but are not able to be here, can I ask you to ask the slide with the address? You can basically see on our banner the site of the Civic Synergy .org.ua, so you can either watch the live stream there or watch it on our Facebook page. We will also have the recording. I don't want to discourage you to come tomorrow, but we will have the recording, so in a appropriate time we will have it on probably YouTube or elsewhere, so you can later revise those moments that you have not listened to. Also, if you tweet or post in Facebook, we have a hashtag AE_forum. So it's always better to place a hashtag to trace the messages. So I encourage you to do that. And so now I think the communication part is over. Do we have? Yes, we have the links here, so you can also use the links below. And this is my last organizational, almost the last organizational matter. So now we can continue our communication here, outside of the doors. And later at 19:30, we have dinner with EU representatives of the EU delegation, specifically the ambassador. Hopefully Ivana Klimpush-Tensadze would join us there. And also MEPs and Ukrainian MPs who are returning back from the parliamentary committee, parliamentary association committee taking place these days in Western Ukraine. So we would hope to have some speeches, some formal speeches, but also a lot of informal communication to bond together and to build this community of association agreement-related experts, practitioners, and everybody else. So you are welcome to join us as well. We are departing from here around 10 minutes past 7. Thank you all.